good evening, listeners and viewers to this week in interview and TDN in general. Welcome to tonight's program of This Week in Interview with your host and guide, Anthony Drago. Tonight we have on tap, as usual, a different conversation. It's about the hurricane season and making sure that we are prepared as we can be for any catastrophic encounter with a storm or some other kind of weather event, whether it's from strong winds or from heavy rains or flooding or landslides. And as I always say on this weekend interview, we don't bring you topics in a usual way where you can just find it yourself. We try to bring it to you from a different angle. So my guest tonight is a geologist, and I want you to stick around to find out what does a geologist have to do with disaster preparedness. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. And as I said tonight, I'm very excited about our topic tonight because we are in the month of June. We are still in the month of June. We are almost in the month of July. Today is the 28th of June, which means that we are more than past the halfway mark. We're just about halfway mark, January to June, and then July to December is the other 6 months. And so in the middle of the hurricane season, the Atlantic hurricane season. Those of you who live in the Caribbean or vacation there or have family and friends who live there know that means that you have to be on alert and the lookout for hurricanes. And so that's our topic tonight. So I want to give a very warm welcome to you, regular listeners to this weekend interview. Welcome back. I always appreciate you spending that hour with me. Sometimes I indulge and I go for up to almost 2 hours. Last week we went quite a little bit over, thanks to our guest, Mr. Bushman, the indigenous Bushman. So much good information, we couldn't stop at the hour. And of course, if tonight is the first time that you're listening to this weekend interview, welcome to you. I hope that after you hear how we present and what we present, you too will become a regular listener to this weekend interview. I keep saying listeners, but listeners and viewers. In Dominica, our associate station, RVR Jams, is an online radio station it carries this weekend interview live on DG Play Channel 59, Radio SBE Online in Toronto, Canada, who caters primarily to the Haitian community up there, also carries this weekend interview live. Of course, we are on Facebook, This Week in Interview Facebook page, our TDN Radio Facebook page. Those of you who don't do Facebook, TDNTV.net, TDNTV.net. Those of you as well who may be driving or do in some other occupation, watching your pot, boil your dinner, you may not have the chance to have us on video. There is always the true and tried and proven TDNradio.net. Also, we are on YouTube, TDN Network 1 on YouTube. We are on Instagram, we are on Roku, and all the other social media platforms. You can find us anywhere that you get your social media. There's one link. If you want to share with someone, you want to invite them, asking you to invite 5 people to come in with us. We have such valuable information. The link on the screen, Linktree /TDN Network. Linktree is S13E24 Linktree so /TDN network. When you follow that link, it will show you all the various ways in which you can make your choice how you want to listen or view this week in interview. And while you're there, I would like you to subscribe to our channel, follow us, and hit the notification button so you can get notified when all of this great programming is coming live to remind you. So that's one less thing you have to worry about. You will be reminded automatically if you hit the notification bell and you follow and like this week in interview. I get a lot of feedback from folks that they're really happy and satisfied with the programs that we bring and information that we bring. So thank you for that feedback. It's always welcome. Suggestions for future guests, topics, and just in general, what we're doing okay and um, where we can possibly improve. All of those feedback. And don't worry about hurting my feelings. Tell it to me as it is. And I will appreciate it and take it on board and try to incorporate it into the program. Well, as I said tonight, because we are in the real start, we are in the opening over of the hurricane season. We thought that we would talk to you about preparing for a catastrophic event, disaster preparedness, or just, this is where I would say the word resilient, but they use resilient in a Dominican context in such a bad way. I don't even, resilience has become a bad word for me, so I have to find a different synonym for resilient. But how do we prepare in such a way that make us more resistant and more hardened against storms and other events that can be disruptive to our lives? And so we would have put in this program together, and we wanted to do it differently because by now all of us know, you have some dry food, you protect it from getting wet, you have a flashlight, you have batteries, you have a radio, all of those mundane things that you do right at the hurricane season. But how do we make sure that we are ready when the hurricane season rolls around? And so I invited my friend Len Matthew to come on. He is a geologist, but he's one smart guy. So it's not only because he's a geologist I invited him on. But however, his geology has a lot to do with preparing for disaster. So it's not by accident that he's on there. Bring it to you from a different perspective. Wrap our hands around it, wrap our minds around it, so that we can have a full discussion. So my brother Len, welcome to this week in interview. It's a pleasure to have you back. How have you been?
Thanks for having me back, Driver. I've been all right, a bit busy, but always making time to express and share the information that we've learned over the years and the experience. I like to joke. I have so much stuff in my head, so when I get this opportunity, it's a time to release some of them so I can make space for some new information.
Certainly that I can fully understand that. Your voice is becoming very loud and very relevant in a
Yeah,
lot of the debates that's going on in Dominica and the Caribbean, and in bringing a different perspective. And so you fit right in with the motto of this week's interview, where I like to say we bring you contemporary issues, but we bring it to you from a different perspective, a different angle. And so I think you're the perfect guest for us to talk about disaster recovery. Um,
I
for
appreciate
those
it.
of you pick up new all the time and viewers, so let's do away with the preliminaries, give folks a little bit of a background of who is Len Matthew, the geologist.
Well, as no stranger to your show, Drago, and for your listeners, name is Lennon Matthew. For those of you who can see me online, you can see my background, and my background is a photo of Mont Diablo thing. And if I were to be standing in Benz, where I'm from, that is the view I had growing up every day of my life in Dominica. prior to living in the United States, I grew up in Benz, went to school in with my dad was a teacher, so I went to school in Benz, in Vickers, in Paybush, at PSS, and at sixth form college I studied geography and biology. And I remembered on my final exams, one of the questions they asked over 20 something years ago was, how does the increase in temperature affect weather and climate? How does it affect the environment? And I had to write a paper on that. I was probably 17, 18 years old. So talking about storms and talking about hurricanes is nothing new. As a little kid, if you guys from Dominica remember, Cable and Wireless had a little book that had the directory in there, and at the back of the Cable and Wireless book had a diagram with the lines of latitude and longitude and the Caribbean, and it was specifically in there to track hurricanes. So I would listen to the during the storm season, I would listen to the hurricanes when they're coming, find out what their latitude and longitude was, and you could put a dot in there and actually track the path of the hurricane. So Drago, I'm no stranger to storms. When I studied at the sixth form college, I taught geography for 2 years at the Portsmouth Secondary School. Part of the geography studies is weather and climate, so I understand the genesis of hurricanes. I understand the dynamics of hurricanes. I understand the dynamics of weather systems. And after a 2 year stint at Portsmouth Secondary School, I went out to study geology. And one of the rules of geology, the laws of geology, is the present is the key to the past. And why that is important is when you go out there and you study rock formations and you study you study mountains and you study all those things. Um, Part of what leaves the print on the rock or the messaging on the writing are the systems, the energy systems, and the energy systems come from waves, they come from wind, and they come from ice. Anything that's moving. No, what causes the systems? The systems are caused by things like hurricane, flash flooding, tidal waves, and so on. So therefore, to understand geology, you have to understand the natural processes that exist that shape the earth. Like the mountain at my back was shaped by a convergent boundary. That's what happens when plate tectonic made causing volcanoes. It's a natural disaster because it affects human and human settlement and life. Storms, on the other hand, is a scientific process. People call it a natural disaster, but I'll tell you guys something. With the understanding I have right now, if the earth does not have hurricanes, if the earth does not have volcanoes and earthquake, if the earth it's a dead planet. And the reason why I say that, because storms are really a way of transferring heat energy from the pole, from the equator to the poles. It's if anytime you're boiling water, you put a heat source in that water, the water starts to move. It's no difference, because in a storm system you have radiation, you have evaporation, you have condensation, you have pressure gradients, you have things moving from high pressure to low pressure. These are all stuff most of us learn in science class when we were in high school and college, or even elementary school. Nowadays they teach
Right.
you those things.
Mhm.
So a lot of these systems are natural processes that affect the planet. It shapes the planet, it shapes the coast. The issue here is, as time goes by, the earth is a dynamic system, and it changes and adjusts as inputs are put in there. For example, you increase the temperature, you increase the boiling point of water. What that does, it causes more evaporation. As a result, you have higher pressures, and in condensation causes lower pressures. When you have this pressure gradients, then you have earth movements, and it takes it from, as I said, the hot area. So just thinking of hurricanes in that sense. And as a geologist, we are supposed to know how these systems affect the earth. And when we look at the earth story, the mountains, the story that the earth tells you, then we can see what are the risks of the disasters, where disasters occur. For example, I can look at certain areas in Dominica, and I can tell if it's an old a landslide complex, if it's a
So
landslide
so
that has been.
so let's not put too much up front, because somebody say a lot. I mean, you opening like a fast bowler. Um, no, I'm serious, because what we promise the folks is that we're going to approach the disaster recovery
Yeah,
from a new angle. Because the reason why I like what you're doing, Len, is because when we don't understand something, we fear it.
yeah,
As a human being, we fear what we don't understand.
Yeah.
And I would take the position that the more we fear a hurricane, the more we approach these things out of a stance of fear, is the more we stand to suffer from
Yeah.
its occurrence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're talking about the preparedness.
Yeah.
If we don't understand what is a hurricane,
Yeah.
how can we properly prepare for a hurricane?
Exactly. Exactly. And
So
that is kind of where I was taking that with the
yeah,
introduction.
but I just wanted to slow it down because that you know some of this information is new, and even though most of us would have done geography in high school, sometimes we didn't connect the dots.
Yeah.
So I want us to give it, instead of pouring it on them,
Yeah.
let's feed it
Let's
to
give it
them.
slowly. All right.
Let's feed it to them like that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think you've made the case already why you, as a geologist, most natural guest on a program where we're talking about preparing for a hurricane.
Yeah.
Again, because you already explained how you understand how hurricanes are formed and
Yeah.
how hurricanes are necessary for the planet. All right. So let's go back in there. Let's dive back in. All right. And start again. Let's you talk about the genesis of a
Yeah.
hurricane, how a hurricane comes about, how it travels, and so on, and why it is something that is necessary. Those of us in the Caribbean who experience hurricanes will say, but I wish every year would pass with no hurricane. I wish every year would pass with no tropical storm. I wish the summer would just be hot and nice and we can see and we never have to go for a tropical storm. Let's I want you to go back into where you just came from and just talk about the genesis again and how it travels and the necessity for it and so on.
And I'll start with the question you asked. You said, you wish people would think that they would wish there would never be a hurricane during the year.
Right.
So in on Earth there are fluid systems. The ocean is one of them. The air masses are one of them. And what these fluid systems do, they move about. So when you hear about the jet stream, when you hear about the easterlies, when you hear about those different cycles that fluid cycles that's happening, we also have cycles in the ocean. So the ocean currents move around the earth, and you have, animals using that for navigation, for swimming. I mean, turtles, dolphins, all those animals. In the atmosphere, you also have fluid movement, and that is the movement of air masses from one area to the next. And while the air masses move from one area to the next, they pick up moisture. Could you imagine if there was no wind blowing over in the Great Plains that take the moisture from the ocean and bring it into places like Texas? There would be hardly any rainfall. So the perception I have, the perspective I have of the planet is hurricanes and these things are natural systems for the Earth and the planet to exist in a living form. If the systems don't occur, then I think the planet is dead. So you have the African continent. You have a high pressure system starting on the land, and what happens is during the summer, during the summer, the sun, the Earth has a tilted position. So during the summer, the equator gets a higher percentage of exposure to the sun, so it gets really hot. And we know most of life is actually generated by the energy from the sun. So it gets really hot. That mass of air starts expanding. It causes a buildup in pressure. Now, you have this land mass here, and then right next to this land mass, you have a body of water. Well, while you have high pressure on this land mass over the body of water, you have one of the simple processes I mentioned, evaporation. So I'll give you a perfect example. So you have all that evaporation going up. That air reaches to a certain level. It cools. When it condenses, it falls as rain. But when you have that massive condensation, it lowers the pressure. And I'll give you a perfect example that people use every day. So you got a pressure cooker, right? Most people have used a pressure cooker.
Uh-huh.
You take
Right.
a heat source. The way the pressure cooker operates is as soon as you apply that heat source to there, that water in there start expanding. That water and that heat, and it turns into gas. So it turns into steam. And when it turns into steam, it builds up. That's why they call it a pressure cooker. It builds that pressure on that pot. So you got to
Mm.
bottle it down really tight. But guess what happens? If you take that pot and you put it on the water and it cools, the pressure in there really drops. And in our science lab, we used to do a little experiment. So we would take an aluminum can or aluminum can, you will boil the water in there, you'll see it expand. And when you pour some cold water in there, you know what it did? It would shrink and collapse. And that is
Right.
exactly what happens in the environment. So the environment is like a huge lab. These natural processes we do in the lab occurs naturally in the environment. So when you have where the physics comes in is when you have a low pressure system right next to a high pressure system. In the natural laws, not just of science, of life or anything, is things will move from a high pressure to a low pressure. So with the movement of the winds, you're going to have air masses and winds moving from that high pressure to that low pressure. And as the earth rotation and it spins, creates the hurricanes. And that's basically how the hurricanes form. Now the
Right.
hurricanes, if you notice, move from the tropics and from Africa, and they kind of curl up to the north. That's a lot of energy, a lot of wind, and what it really does, it helps redistribute the energy from the poles, preventing that energy buildup at the equator where it's going to get frankly too hot. And because of the removal or the deforestation that has happened to the Sahara Desert, that in itself has affected global climate, and a lot of people don't realize. We're talking about global warming right now, and one of the ways they are trying to slow down global warming is by replanting trees. Well, if you look at the Sahara Desert on a map, there's hardly any trees in there. What that has caused, it has caused a pressure system over that area during the summer that gets pretty worse and actually change the wind's direction coming from North Africa and Morocco and those areas. So the fluid system, which is in the atmosphere, has its own dynamics, and that is what kind of kicks up hurricane. And you hear them tell you that the ocean, the warmth over the ocean fuels. So the scientists look at the ocean temperatures. The scientists look at the ocean, the where those warm waters are moving, and the hurricane tend to feed out of that, because if you have warm waters, you have a more evaporation supplying that energy to the hurricanes as they move. So it's almost like creating life of nothing. And Drago, you know what is interesting? If you see the shapes of the hurricanes when they are moving, if you look at any photos of the galaxies in the universe, they have the same pattern, the same kind of movement. So that tells you
Right.
that the system we have on Earth, it's a natural law, it's the natural processes. And as you said earlier, I think part of the way we approach hurricane response is understanding the genesis of hurricanes. And I have some information there from 1851 to 2017. That's 166 years. That's when they started recording these things. We had an average of 12 named storms, 6.5 named hurricanes on a year, and two major hurricanes. What does that tell you? That tell you for over 166 years, we get hurricanes every year. So these systems don't stop. And as I say, as a geologist, there is evidence in the rocks, not exactly of hurricanes, but the things that hurricanes can create: the landslides, the flooding, the change in the coastal areas, because that's high energy waves. You see different features on the coast that we look at that are formed by high energy. High energy is
Right.
created by earthquakes. So that's where the geology comes in, understanding the systems. And I think once you understand what you're dealing with, because we can't get away from it. And by now, as you mentioned, we have hurricanes every year. So everybody in Dominica should be an expert in the immediate response to a hurricane. I mean,
To
everybody
hurricane.
knows, like you mentioned, we should have flashlight. Hurricane preparedness should be part of our lives. I mean, I was born in 1979, and from the time I may remember, the only story I heard of how bad Hurricane David was. I heard Hurricane David, Hurricane Allen, Hurricane Luis, Hurricane Maria, Hurricane
I
Hugo,
remember all of
Hurricane
them.
Gilbert, Hurricane. I mean, what's the one that Hurricane Andrew? I mean, we've heard about them for years. So therefore, every year, I frankly believe people living in the Caribbean should be experts in hurricane response, should be experts in hurricane prediction, should be experts in hurricane preparedness and disaster preparedness. So
Right.
that's I think if you are exposed to a natural disaster, and natural disasters happen anyway. We talk about earthquakes, we talk about volcanoes. Some of them are more frequent than others. Um, I, I said natural disasters. Natural phenomena happen. They become disasters when they affect human life, when they
And
affect life and
the
property.
impact on
The-
humans. So
exactly. That's
mhm,
basically what it is. Cause them to be called disasters, but they are really
call them
natural phenomena.
right. So now, folks, when we watch a weather report, most of us look at the weather report and we hear, oh, there's an area of low pressure over there, and there's a wave, a tropical depression, then it becomes a wave, and then it becomes a tropical storm, and then it becomes a hurricane. So the next time you hear about the area of low pressure or area of high pressure, you have a little better understanding of what the weatherman is talking about. Because most of us gloss over that and say, yeah, just tell me if it's going to rain and what the temperature is going to be today, what's the high, what's the low, and if we're expecting rain. But you can understand the information that's in the weather report a little bit better, and the more we understand it, is the more we become familiar, and we can deal with it not from a position of fear, but from a position of management. Because what, as you said, we cannot get away from it. For the last 166 years, there's an average of 2 hurricanes a year. And you said six named storms. No,
Yeah,
10 named
so
storms,
12 named
six
storms, 6.5 named hurricanes. And hurricanes are when
hurricanes.
you have wind at 75 miles an hour and above, and two major hurricanes. So you're talking about 100, and above. So you have two major hurricanes, and it doesn't take much to cause destruction. Six named hurricanes, that's 75 miles per hour, and 12 named storms. So storms start probably 30, 35 gale force winds. And as the wind speed increase, then on the Saffir-Simpson scale, they have measurements. But as the wind speed increased between a range, then it changed from a storm to a hurricane to a major hurricane or category 5. So the Saffir Simpson have category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's basically what it is.
That's what
Yeah.
it is. So we're at 8:30 right now. I think we've done a good job of setting the foundation as to
Yeah.
what a hurricane is. We take our commercial break now. And when we come back, we're going to talk to folks about, now that you have a better understanding of it, what should we be doing? Or what should you have already done? But for what you should have done, let's start where we are. What we should be doing to make sure that this average of 2 major storms a year comes to us and it doesn't become a disaster. Because according to my guest tonight, Mr. Len Matthew, a hurricane is just a weather phenomenon. It becomes a disaster because of a huge negative impact it has on us humans. So if we can get to a life where a hurricane is coming, we close our door, we close our windows, and the storm passes, the next morning we come outside and we say, hey, a branch break or whatever it is, and we go about our life. It wasn't a disaster, it was just a hurricane, right? So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about what are the things that we should be doing to get closer to that experience of a major weather event. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
Presented by. People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
If you live in Canada, the US, and the UK and are looking for Dominica products including cocoa sticks, bay rum, coffee, soaps, crafts, and other popular Dominica items, then look no further. You can now shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, a secure, easy-to-navigate website selling a wide variety of Dominica-made and Dominica-inspired products. When you shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, you are helping to grow Dominica's economy. Go to BuyDominicaOnline.com and enjoy home away from home.
Looking to promote your business, engage current customers, and reach new people? Well, look no further. From the basic presentation to a fully fledged advertisement, use your video ads to attract customers. At Man's Audiovisual Productions, we do just that. We produce videos for business and event promotions, product demo videos, animated explainer videos, fundraiser ads, and much, much more. Engage your clients and sell online. We customize the video to match your brand design. Guaranteed to play flawless on all devices, including smart TVs. Contact us at telephone number 203-690-4342 or 767-245-6238. Visit our website, mansaudiovisual.com, or email us at derekvideo@gmail.com.
Welcome back to the break. Always we're grateful to the sponsors. We're very, very grateful to the sponsors who support This Week in Interview every week. Thank you for that. So get your Dominican products from BuyDominicaOnline.com. And also, you have Man's Audiovisual for all of your promotion material that you need. And also, Beacon Dental Health. If you're in the Boston area, they have a stellar, a very, very good and well-equipped dental facility. Before we go back to the guests, I think we have some basic disaster information, contact information. I don't know if Sam, you want to put that up. Okay, there we go. So on the screen, we have it's small, so I hope you can see it because I'm looking at it from my phone. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. There we go. Headquarters, emergency numbers, headquarters, Roseau, 4482888. There's other number 266-4400. There's a Grand Bay Station, and 266-4402. There's Kenfield Fire Station, 266-2303. So is there a website where they can go and see all of this information? I don't know. So if you can see it, folks, take a screenshot, and we also have it on our website. We also have it on TDN Radio website and This Week in Interviews website, TDN Radio's website and Facebook page, where you can find all of this information. All right. So, folks, if you didn't join us at the beginning of the program, tonight we're talking about hurricane preparedness. What do we do to prepare for a hurricane? And so in the first half of the program, my guest tonight, Mr. Len Matthew, who is a geologist, but from what he's told us, he's just an all-around weather enthusiast. And since he was young, he would track hurricanes and he used to teach geography. So he's well equipped to talk to us about hurricanes. and preparing for hurricanes. He gave us a very good background on the formation of hurricanes and the usefulness of hurricanes in terms of a weather system, moving air around the globe and bringing mixing temperatures and all of that, similar to currents that mix temperatures in the oceans and move nutrients from one point to another. This type of weather phenomena also have their uses. So, Len, now that we've have hopefully we are less afraid of hurricanes because we understand what they are. When you think about preparing for a hurricane, being prepared for a hurricane, or being prepared for hurricane season, how do you think, how do you approach that? How should our people be approaching preparing for a storm?
So I think there should be several levels of preparation. So you have on a there is the short-term preparation, which is what everybody typically does. We all
Right.
know the hurricane season is from June to November. So you hear on the radio, hurricane season is here, hurricane season is here. Get your flashlight, get your extra food, get your radios, get your medicines, get your emergency response kit, get all that information. Know your emergency contact. I mean, these things are drilled every year. It's like the Bible. You get the chapters every year. Every year you get the same information. Then there's the long-term preparation. The long-term preparation has to do a little more in depth with understanding where your geography is, understanding what is your landform, what is your landform response to hurricanes. What are the main contributing factors to the changing of the landforms and affecting us in hurricanes? You talk about high winds, you talk about flash flooding, you talk about the landslides. All that are secondary disasters caused by the hurricane itself. But one funny thing, I remember when a hurricane Maria passed, we were talking to some of our friends, and I was paying attention to the hurricane while it was heading for Dominica. If you go on Bay News 9 in Tampa, because Florida also has effect from hurricane, they have a good system where they have satellite imagery and you can actually see the storms. And they have the hurricane hunters flying through the storms that is giving you real-time data and information. And when I saw the hurricane change and there was wind up to 150 something, over 150 something miles, category 5 hurricane. And what was amazing to me, and I'm talking about the preparation, what was amazing to me was in 150 something mile per hour wind, after the hurricane was done, the first thing to come out were parrots.
Oh, really? Wow.
Were birds. And,
Mm-hmm.
and you would think for a hurricane to stay over the island that long, whipping up winds of 100 and something miles per hour. And at the end of the day, we know we have Cicero's, Jacu, and all kind of bird species. I have always been fascinated as to where do these animals go? So my question is, what sort of hurricane preparation that do they have to be able to survive the storm? So if we as human beings,
that's such a curious thing, right? Because you would think that they're 100% exposed.
they're exposed. You would think they're exposed. And what I have learned is that because we are in a living ecosystem, a biosphere, there are lots of things in nature that actually gives us the know-how, gives us the lessons, gives us how to survive. We just don't pay attention to it. I mean, in the past, you talk about places like China was able to know when earthquakes were happening by looking at the behavior of animals, and they could tell you, hey, something is going to happen. So people observe that. The reason why I'm saying that is parrots don't have disaster preparedness community. Probably they do. I don't know. Who knows? Parrots don't have emergency ambulance, but they survive. And I would ask the question, how do they survive? And if seeing that the system is so natural, it tells you that even during the hurricanes, we have the ability to survive, even if the storm is pretty bad. So you do the short-term preparation, but the long-term preparation is, like I said earlier, understanding how the hurricanes, for example, you look at Antigua. Antigua is a flat place. So if there's a lot of rainfall, Barbados, what do you think is the greatest effect on hurricanes? It's the flooding. So you look at Dominica. Dominica is a very mountainous place, and historically, what has killed more people in Dominica are the landslides. So
Right.
having that thing in mind, you have to say, okay, as a geologist, what we really do is understanding one of the things we not what one of the things we do is understanding these disasters that exist in our environment where we live. How do you mitigate against this disaster? So we look for signs of earthquake. We look for signs of we know volcanoes, they're pretty obvious. Earthquakes, we look for fault lines. We look for difference in trees. Hurricanes, we know what the deal is. We know that it causes landslides. So therefore, one of the long-term effects is how do you locate your residence? Where do you locate your homes? And I think historically what has happened, Dominica has a history of, plantations, and most people live on the edges of this plantation. It's not the best place for settlements, but that's what we could do. And communities develop around that. Historically, most of the people stayed near rivers and streams because it was an easy source of food and easy source of transportation. So some of those communities continue growing and expanding because that's where people had land. So when you're doing the preparation, you have to first identify what are the major effects of the hurricane. Is it causing the landslide? Are my houses in the right location? What are some of the rules we hear at the talk about resilience? Because after Hurricane Maria, 90% of the houses lose their roof. Did they have the right nails? Did they have screws? Did they have bolts? What can we do to prevent that from happening the next time? All these are some of the things. And one of the big deals with hurricane resilience, believe it or not, is economics. Having a society that can afford to pay for insurance. Because in a case like Dominica, I know there are a lot of people who cannot afford to pay insurance. And as a result of the storm, then they can get compensation. And guess what? Some people are still living with tarpaulin on their roof because they just don't have the money.
And also, insurance is failed.
It's failed.
So as a community, what can you do to help that insurance spread the risk so that when they get a catastrophic event like that, they don't fail? Because in the US, when you have a major event that causes a lot of claims on an insurance, the federal government steps in and helps the insurance. They don't fail because they understand if this insurance fails, it's going to be a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe.
And that is why I'm mentioning that, because even in the US right now, because Florida has been affected so much by hurricanes, their insurance premiums went up to the point where people pay more insurance than their mortgage. Now, if you're in a society where you're not having a regular income, you're not generating income, you can't afford that. And if you're in a society where the state is not generating, the GDP is low, the state now has to decide how much money I'm going to put in a escrow or pool, so that when hurricane, a disaster fund, so when hurricane come, I can help my people, I can help the folks. So all these things have to be in play in the long run, in the long-term planning of disaster preparedness. It's not just about making sure you have flashlight, but the safety of your buildings, the safety standards of your buildings, the economic growth of the country. What money we can put aside so when there are storms we can better attend to the people who can't afford, because really and truly insurance going to get high. And you're right. Some insurance have gone underwater because of hurricanes, because insurance is not prepared for 100% destruction. They're just not designed for that. And if you're in a society where the economy is really bad, we see that happen in Haiti all the time. Then people can't afford to build simple houses, and it can plunge people into a cycle of poverty. So having this kind of things in mind, we have to ensure it's not just about the physical structure, but having a society that has economic growth, so that we can, when we can have the extra to put aside for hurricane relief. So when things like that happen, we can better respond to the people. And then there's also a couple of things in terms of the response. I think there should be, for the Caribbean on a whole, there should be 3 levels of response. There should be a regional response, there's a national response, and the local response. And what I mean by local response, in the US, they also have what they call community emergency response teams. It's called CERT for short. And you just put up an ad there with your local shelters and so on. So, I mean, the headquarters is probably in Roseville. You have one police station in Granby and so on. But when a disaster happens, I think one of the best response you can have is the local response. And I have observed in the past few years that there are people going around in Dominica doing CERT training. so that people in the local communities, you set up teams in the communities that every year go through a couple months of training, especially right before the hurricane, and they're able to do first aid, they're able to do recovery, because a lot of times the most important factor in when somebody's missing or a storm is time. And if you have people in the area that are trained to respond to those things, then there's a better chance of survival. If you want to get people with, collecting data, collecting information, understanding how to operate the radio, so we can better communicate with a command center saying, hey, this is what we have, this is the casualty we have, we can apply first aid and just sustaining life. So that's the local response. And it's not just for hurricanes, but for fires, for earthquakes, and for other incidents, accidents,
volcanoes,
volcanoes, all those kind of things.
Landslide,
Yep,
everything.
yep. On the national level,
go ahead. No,
on the national level, you need to have a national response, a coordinated effort dealing with the finances. Where are our resources located? What is our fire ambulance doing? What is our police responsibility? What is the local community responsibility? What is the national government responsibility? What is the responsibility of NEPO? What is the responsibility of the National Disaster Preparedness Community? These are some of the things that they have to do. Some of these things have to be in policy, because if they're not in policy, people are not compelled. Like I said, for 166 years, we are living in a region where hurricane is part of our life. So preparing for hurricane should be part of the process. And then there is the regional response. And Drago, prior to you and I talking, we had this conversation. When there is a storm in the US, when there is a hurricane, the first things that go empty is the Walmarts, the Lowe's, the Home Depot. And what people don't pay attention to, because we look at so much of the negative impact and the fear, hurricane create a demand. And I draw the reference to Creole Music Festival. We have Creole Music Festival every year. Why people talk about Creole Music Festival? Really and truly, Creole Music Festival creates a demand. It creates a demand for entertainment, for music, for food, for drinks,
hotel rooms,
for hotel rooms and all that stuff. Yeah. That is economics. Why it's economics? Because if you create a demand, now you have to supply that demand. And when you supply that demand, somebody have to manufacture and produce those goods, produce the beer, bring the chicken. That generates economic activity. But guess what? Hurricane creates a demand. So if a hurricane passes and it destroys 99% of the roofs, guess what? It has just created a demand for building material, for masons, for contractors, and all that stuff. That service have to be prepared. And what I think we have been lapsing in the Caribbean region is when we do the response, because we sit with so much the fear, and I don't know what it is, but we don't realize when people go spending money in the US and elsewhere sending barrels, we're actually fueling the economy of these countries in the hurricane response. So my point is, why can't we fuel the economy in the Caribbean with that demand that has been created? We don't have a choice. It comes in every year. We make the best out of it. And why I say that is, hurricane hits Dominica. Trinidad is fine. Some other countries is fine. I think the regional response, there has to be a coordination of where our food resources or material resources are, if they're in specific islands. And I think instead of selling goods and clothes, which end up being thrown and being a waste by the side, I think there should be more monetary donations to the Caribbean. The materials should be sourced in the Caribbean. The goods and services should be sourced in the Caribbean. That way, there will be a big influx of money and funds that is much needed in the region. And for example, if there's a hurricane and we see, you can put up food storage in several different islands just in case something hits St. Lucia. No, Dominica can provide. Dominica should be able to provide water for all these countries. These are some of the things that we have to think on a regional level. You can't do it by an island level. So there has to be regional coordination in understanding the economic impact of hurricanes, because millions and billions of dollars are spent. And you just said, here's one thing. Some companies make a lot of money in hurricane response. For example, in the Virgin Islands, that hurricane that hit a couple of years ago, the U.S. federal government, they declared a disaster emergency. So once that declaration is made, the federal government releases funds for the rebuilding of that place. Now you have companies that are contracted to go down to that place, and millions and millions of dollars are spent in rebuilding. It creates employment. It creates like I said, a demand for food services, for hotels, for rent. So I'm saying, because that is something that is natural that we can't help, but it destroys stuff. Why don't we capitalize on that aspect of it? where we can have an influx of cash and services and jobs in the Caribbean in carpentry and mason. And then what about our educational system, our school? Why isn't it the University of the West Indies the leading institution in hurricane research and hurricane recovery and architecture and engineering design for hurricane resistance? We are actually in a living lab. We are in the place that is affected by hurricanes. So the education of our people, the intellectuals in the Caribbean, should get together and find out what is the best way. We don't have to go anywhere to test these equipments. All you have to do is design a building and put it in Dominica, leave it there for 2 years. I guarantee you it might get tested within 2 years. And I think we have to think on that level, because hurricanes are not going away. But at the end of the day, how can we live and benefit in terms of the demand that it creates, and capturing the supply, the need for food, the need for dry goods, and so on within the Caribbean region that generates that economic activity and sending it somewhere else.
Yeah, create what you might actually want to describe it that way, a hurricane economy. So in terms of preparing for a hurricane, we know you need to have something to collect drinking water and have some drinking water stored. You know you need a flashlight or something that's water resistant. You might need a radio that a battery that doesn't depend on electricity. You make sure your cell phones are fully charged. And maybe you have a portable charger so that is also fully charged, so at least you might have 2 or 3 days of cell phone service if the cell works. Those of you remember that TDN played an integral part in the response and the recovery from Hurricane Maria. We were the ones who were live on air 24 hours for weeks after Hurricane Maria. We are the ones who put out the notice out there, and some ham radio operator in Michigan heard of us, and he tried to contact, and he finally got a word from a ham operator in Portsmouth, and he called us. That was the first word that came out of Dominica after Hurricane Maria. But that just happened by happenstance, because we happened to be hosting Q95 server, and when the storm was coming, we took over control of the server, and so we had that. People heard it on Q95, but it was really TDN that was running that. But having that experience, have we now, as a country, say, that was something that happened by accident? Should we not deliberately design a means by which we can communicate to the outside world if something like that were to happen again? And you talk about regional. The regional security system doesn't have a helicopter. You had a major disaster like happened in Dominica, and they had to wait for, I think, the United States to bring a helicopter down so that they could fly into Dominica on a helicopter. How can you be a regional security system who's supposed to respond to disasters, but you don't have a helicopter? What is that? So then I'm listening to you speak, and what I'm getting from you is that, over the years, we kind of know what to do when hurricane season is here, when a storm is approaching 2-3 days before a storm approaches. But what you're saying is that this preparedness should happen all year round. I mean, you should be in constant mode. If you are an entrepreneur, can you look at what is the demand that is created when we have a hurricane? And how can you create a business that can service that demand or cater to that demand? And so I think you're making some very salient point about how people should go about preparing for hurricane. Don't think of it as only June too soon and October all over, right? Think of it as we're existing in a place that is influenced by hurricane, average of 2 major hurricanes a year for the last 166 years. 6 named storms, which comes with rain and flooding and all of that. What can we do to make sure that the impact on us is minimized?
That's exactly what and like I said, that's exactly what we should be thinking. It's not going away. I can tell you this much: it's never going away. And I think part of the process is the way I think the mindset is because of the negative view we have of these hurricanes. We don't understand the storms. We think they're natural disasters. They're here to trouble us. At the time the hurricane passed, we go all over the place begging for funds and begging for help. And frankly, some governments see it as an opportunity for them to get money to do as they please. That's what they do. It's an excuse to beg the
or to
IMF
make an excuse for lack of development.
Exactly, and make an excuse for why we are not where we are. And I'm saying, if during the year that we have been increasing our technology, building new designs, having the carpenters and the masons working, having our engineering department of the University of the West Indies developing new building designs. As a matter of fact, there's one of the schools in Florida, USF, where I live. I think there were a couple guys who came to the Caribbean doing a specific glass design that is hurricane resistant, and they're passing all over the Caribbean selling that. Why are we not the ones doing it? You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
We are the ones being affected, but we have brilliant people all over the world, people doing all kind of stuff, but yet still in the Caribbean, we feel that we have to wait for somebody to do something for us. It's in everything we respond to. We talk about, the disease that just passed, COVID-19, and everybody in the Caribbean is waiting for vaccines from the industrial world, while we have Caribbean people working in the US developing vaccines. So my thing is, at the end of the day, these things create demands. Insurance can become a problem if there's not enough economic activity. And I think instead of frankly being pitiful on our knees, we have to use the intellectual brains power we have. We have to use the talent and the resources we have, and build stuff, create stuff. They say survival is the mother of all inventions, and I have yet to see some technology that have developed that we can transfer and sell to other areas in terms of hurricane response. Look at Florida now. Look at the US. For a long time, Hurricane Andrew was the biggest disaster that had hit Florida until Katrina passed, and over 1 point something billion destroyed New Orleans. Guess what? It had to be rebuilt. So that means you have to pump in 100 and something billion into New Orleans to build it, plus whatever else. And that is what I'm talking about. The reason why the federal government can respond is because the United States is the largest economy in the world. So therefore, they have emergency funds. And if a country like that can put emergency funds to help its people, why are we sitting down not doing certain things like that? For we have had countries, I think, on a regional level, the governments of the Caribbean could decide part of their budget agreement is to put a certain percentage of the money in probably the Caribbean Central Bank for hurricane response. They're probably doing something like that. I don't know, but these are some things they should be doing.
Hope, right? We hope.
And then the governments can get low interest loans or whatever the case may be to do that rebuilding and spend that money within the island. So if Trinidad has the building material, if Antigua has whatever the case may be, if Dominica has water, then you can source this material from the Caribbean. That way it generates revenue and generate income. But unless we think like that, what we keep doing is we sit on our knees, we beg and ask for money from some country. These countries have to be working. And our family and friends go to Walmart, they go to Lowe's, they spend thousands of dollars and they send material. People dump clothes into the island. I saw one of the hurricane response they had not too long ago. They send clothes, disaster response, clothes to one of these places. The shoes doesn't match, the clothes don't fit. Some of the goods that come stay in containers and they get spoiled. Yeah, that is waste. And they have to be burning clothes all over the place. I mean, we have to review how we do hurricane response. Like I said, Drago, hurricanes create a demand. Just like I'll give you a perfect example. People say war on war. Human beings have been fighting war for generations. Do you know there is an industrial military complex? And war is one of the biggest generator of revenue around the world. But
I'll tell you, after
it's not good.
Maria, it's not good, but you get an economic benefit from it. After Hurricane Maria, some people contacted me, and we sent a lot of seeds to Dominica. Tomato seeds, carrots, all kind of short-term seeds.
Yeah.
Package them, and we send them to Dominica to give to farmers all over the island. So something as simple as that. Why can't we have a seed bank? Okay, that if a disaster like that happens, you can go to your seed bank now and say, listen, farmers, we will give you cabbage, carrot, lettuce,
Yeah, yeah,
cucumbers, whatever it is,
yeah,
so that as soon as possible we can start to feed ourselves again. You
yeah,
know, and like you said, it's a matter of thinking about this thing, not from a point of view of well, a disaster happens and it's going to destroy us. So we all we can do is duck, right? We have to say, listen, disaster is going to happen, but when it happens, we have to be prepared. Let me give you a little story about Norway. Norway is a country that depends quite a bit on petroleum, oil, and so on for their economy. And everybody knows that oil goes through a tremendous boom and bust.
yeah,
So every time there's a bust, the economy was tanking, going into depression. The people were suffering from it. You know what they did? They decided that when they're in the period of boom, they're going to take some of that money and put it in a fund that they call a sovereign fund, and to invest that money so that when it dips because they're in a bust, they can invest into the economy and smoothen out that curve so that the impact of the is lessened. That is
yeah,
the thinking that we need to approach hurricane.
yeah,
Dominica sells so much passports, so many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars is generated. Why can't some of that money be put into a fund? You know, we don't have to. It don't even have to take creativity. Somebody do it already. Just follow fashion
yeah.
because you see the good result. Put it in a fund, invest it. Norway goes around the world. They send the experts around the world free of charge to show them what they did and how they too can do it.
Yeah.
But Dominica doesn't do it. I said Antigua doesn't do it. None of the
And
Caribbean islands does it.
and the thing about it, Drago. So what does the Norwegians have in their brain that we don't have? I mean, we have, like I said, we have intelligent people working in the CDC in the US developing vaccines. I know Dr. Augustine. He was talking, during the COVID. So like I said, survival is the mode of invention. So at the end of the day, if the Norwegians realize they have a problem as a nation, they are intellectuals, they are brilliant people. You earlier on when I mentioned about hurricanes, you said, we were in geography class, but we were not able to put the points together. That's what we do. So all this education we have, what is the purpose of all this education if it's not used for economic growth, economic development? We have to be able to use our brains and figure out what might work in Norway. It's a blueprint, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work down here. So we as a nation, brilliant people understanding the systems, understanding how the systems work, understanding how to survive within the systems, can make observations. Like I said, we have over 40 years of natural science labs. Every year hurricane comes, there's a new observation, and how you learn is by seeing what happens, seeing the effects, and making the adjustments. So therefore, when you see the effects on our plants, you see the effects on our biodiversity, you see the effects on our fauna,
Water,
on
yeah,
our
the
water.
effects on our slopes that
Oh,
slide.
exactly.
Yeah,
Our slopes. And then the other thing I didn't mention, when you're doing planning and development of a disaster preparedness, it's a multidiscipline, a multifaceted approach. You need to have your agricultural department, you need to have your agriculturists, you need to have your fire and ambulance, you need to have your security, you need to have your biologists, you need to have your geologists that will tell you about your slopes and your slope stability and where it's not safe, and you need to have hydro people, you need to have your meteorologists, because part of the issue is we are so compartmentalized in our solutions that we don't realize all these disciplines make a better decision. So you can have that vision to say, hey, you know what, we need seeds. And I'll give you a perfect example. I went to a place in Portsmouth. I came down for my brother's wedding, and I'm looking next to Picard, and there are buildings like crazy, and the road is like it was when they had banana days. So I'm asking the folks, what if a fire happens in the building? How is the fire truck going to come up there if all these vehicles are out there? Didn't somebody think of hey, we might need to have an exit. We might need to have a parking spot. What is fire
You might
situation?
need to make the road a 2-lane road and pave
A
it.
two-lane road, and in our development, we don't think about these long-term things. We build a situation, and because there is one set of people that decide, hey, I'm doing this because that's my department, I'm responsible, and we don't get the input from the other professionals. So
So we
therefore,
suffer from all the blind spots of that person because
exactly,
they don't have that
exactly.
knowledge.
Exactly. So after 40 years and 166 years of experience of hurricanes, every Dominican should be an expert in the short-term response to a hurricane. If you're not, then I don't think anything else will help us, because we've been having it for over 40 years. But the long-term vision, the regional and national, is where that response has to look at what you said with Norway, putting a fund, a disaster fund together, and understanding the demand that hurricane creates, and capturing that demand and capturing the supply. So therefore, you have, as soon as the hurricane is over, you have your carpenters working. You need food. You have what can we do to sustain ourselves? And we can't do everything. But at the end of the day,
Even before that, you fix your curriculum so that you
exactly.
train in carpenters, you train in masons, you train in
exactly. Exactly. So it's not just oh, a storm is coming. Let's boil water. Let's do that. I mean, like every year I hear that, and I say to myself, I mean, if the parrots know how to survive a hurricane and we don't know how to survive a hurricane when it comes, then I don't know what else to say. But at the end of the day, the bigger picture of living and existing within storms, and talking about disaster response. For example, you look at Japan. They know in Japan they have tsunamis, they have earthquakes, and they design buildings that actually have high tolerance for and for resonance. When the earth shakes, they have pendulums that absorbs that shake, that prevents serious damage. These people can't go anywhere, so they have to live within that system. But you know what they did? They use their brains. They use that intellect. They find solutions to the problems and they fix it. All that education has to translate to practical application. And I think
exactly.
a lot of times our style of education is so much about regurgitation. You put somebody in a situation, they don't even realize that the same pressure cooker I have, they're boiling. That's what the hurricane system is basically doing. So some of the things I'm saying is making that practical application so that we don't have to call England, call the IMF, and sit down there waiting to see who's going to save us when we have the innate ability to save ourselves.
Sit down there ringing your hand saying Sapufe, right?
Sapufe, exactly. Always got that punishing us, it's whatever the case may be. And we don't use our perfect another example, for example, Haiti. Right where Port-au-Prince in Haiti is, there is a fault that runs across to Jamaica. Like I said, if I look on a map as a geologist, I can see it. And I can look at the features and tell where they are landslide. And there's a fault running all the way to Port-au-Prince. And it goes all the way out through the Dominican Republic, and there's two legs of that fault. Well, somewhere in the 1800s, when there was an earthquake up there, killed about 1,000-something people, they realized they're on an earthquake fault. So the thought at the time was, hey, we can't build buildings around that area, especially brick buildings or stone buildings, because when the earthquake passes, that's the first thing to fall if it's not built properly. So for a time, they were building wooden structures. Well, guess what happened? Hurricanes started coming and wooden structures were being destroyed. So they went back to building brick buildings. The rules and the laws that govern how you should build, the concrete is not mixed well, all those things happen. In 2010? When we had that earthquake, 250,000 people get killed. The major earthquake, 250,000 people get killed. Guess what? That fault has been there for centuries and it's not going away. And every time I hear the regional governments come and they give, we in solidarity. And it really irks me, because we just come and we give statements, but there's nothing practical. The University of the West Indies is not using the intellectual knowledge to see how we can, design new buildings so the people can still live where they are. Have some resistance.
You can be resistant to hurricanes and
the earthquakes. Exactly. And that's
you can come to Dominica, because Dominica have a lot of wooden houses that survive all the major storms.
For a long time. I mean, I grew up in one when I was younger. We had wooden houses that survived Hurricane David, and people talk about it. I still remember as a little kid there were props holding some of those buildings. Those
Hmm.
buildings are not destroyed as much in earthquakes. So I think, as time passes, what we do as human beings is we learn from the environment.
We're
We learn.
supposed to, right?
That is what it is supposed to. But the animals do it. The animals do it. And yet still we are more sophisticated. And I think we get complacent. And I think sometimes we become lazy. And we don't think, we don't use our head. But that's what we do to survive. And a simple situation, if in the 1800s in Haiti, they knew not to build this kind of structures there. Why in 2010, when we are supposedly more educated, more advanced, we have 250,000 people get killed? It has to do with the
Get
increasing
you.
population, all that stuff.
Exactly, exactly.
But
You
so
know, when I was growing up in a country, we used to look at the behavior of animals to know when
yeah,
a storm was coming,
yeah,
because we
yeah,
didn't have all this good prediction of storms and hurricanes. If you go to do your cattle and the cattle is restless and you see all the chickens going in early, there are different things that you look at in the
yeah,
animals and you know that a storm is coming and it's going to be
yeah,
serious. If you on your farm in the mountains, you can look at there are some trees when the
yeah,
wind blows, it turns them the other way. So you
yeah,
see
yeah,
the back of the leaf that is more silverish than the
yeah,
green
yeah,
part, you know you need to be preparing to go home if you have a
yeah,
river to cross, because
yeah,
most likely there's something happening in the mountains that's going to cause the river to flood. You remember all of those intelligent things that we used to work with that we lost, frankly,
yeah,
quite frankly, we lost. And we don't really use instead of improving the technology, we throw away what we have for what is
yeah,
supposed to be new.
yeah,
Then I work in construction in the US, and one of the type of projects I've worked on in the US is to if there is a slope that is at risk of a slide, they
failure.
and yeah, we put soil nails. We
Yeah,
drive what is called soil nails into the slope. We
yeah,
fill it with concrete and we dress up the slope with shrub and stuff to prevent erosion.
yeah,
And it prevents that slope from, it actually make it a lot less susceptible to a
yeah.
landslide.
What you're doing is you're increasing the shear strength of the slope. And
Exactly.
I'll just for your listeners, I'll give you an example of why there are landslides. So on a dry soil, there's what they call frictional force. So what holds some slopes together is the friction between the particles that hold the soil together. Why do we have landslide when it rains? Is because the soil becomes waterlogged and it reduces that frictional strength and the soil slides off. That is basically what causes landslide on a
Yeah.
basic explanation. You have things like rockfall. Over time, you have weathering, you have thermal expansion, you have biological weathering with where roots get into the rock formation. Those roots that grow in, the rocks get loose over a period of time, you see they falling off with a lot of moisture. When you have a lot of rainfall, you have a lot of decomposition. This become weak. And once they become weak, any vibration, any tremors, you have landslides and so on. So understanding those things, then you put systems in place. Like you said, guess what? A dry go. One of the basic form of slope stabilization is using vetiver. Vetiver is one of those grasses that has one of the longest root system, and a lot of places they use them for slope stabilization because they have root system, that fibrous root system that can grow up to 6-8 feet into the soil that holds the soil together. And what you're basically doing is you increasing the frictional strength of the slope so it stays in place, and you can do that by using, you said, your nails and using concrete stuff. It solidifies it, it reduces the water. So these are some of the things we have to understand those processes. So if you're in Dominica and you decide, okay, we have slopes where people are living, we have to every year at least go through the area, look at the drainage, see if there's proper drainage, look at how the water is flowing, do some studies. You can put in some lysimeters somewhere else, find out what the groundwater flow is there, what the groundwater concentration, what the groundwater hydrology is in the area, and see what the lithology, the soil compact, the soil composition is. And you can say, hey, you know what, that stuff is going to probably slide off in a few years. You can drive along a lot of areas in Dominica and see those things happening. As a matter of fact, if you go around the island, landslides have a particular form when they're done. They have a steep face and there's almost like a alluvial body to them. So over a period of time, trees grow and the trees help stabilize the slope. One of the reasons Haiti have a lot of landslides and a lot of sediments in the rivers because they cut down their forests. So our trees play a very important role in the stability of the landform because with all that rain that's falling, if Dominica wasn't forested, we would have terrible, terrible streams and waters. So all these systems, the biosphere, the living earth, as I call it, the living earth is designed for our existence. Everything is built in there for us. We as human beings interrupt it, and the earth has to adjust and correct itself. So we have what it takes in the Caribbean. We have what it takes as a people to survive and to think and to innovate and create. And I think what the hurricane season presents for us is ability to use our brains, our mind to come up with new ideas, come up with new things for water conservation, come up with new energy storage things so that we as a people can survive. And then you can translate that know-how on energy and education into some other areas around the world.
Yeah, so then I guess I know bringing you on was going to create that atmosphere of stimulative thought, you know. We just have to think about it differently.
Yes.
The technology is there for us to build buildings that are resistant to hurricane. We see so many of the government buildings that are put on the riverbanks. Like now, we should learn not to interfere with our riverbank.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, most of our farms used to have a windbreak made with used to be galba trees and bamboo and those kind of different trees. We cut that down, but there used to be regulation that would save a certain amount of buffer in the direction of where the wind normally comes from. That would be a windbreak.
Yeah.
All of those things that we used to practice, they were not expensive things, but they were practical. A lot of the estates, like you said, there would be drains, dogs.
Yeah.
And over time, we just allow those drains to get filled in.
Those
drains would control the flow of water, so you don't get.
That's what they were there for.
All of us are getting waterlogged.
Yeah.
You know, that is what we have to do to prepare for a hurricane. Not wait until you hear Hurricane Cindy is coming and you hope and pray that it doesn't hit us. And no, hurricane preparedness is supposed to be a 365-day activity where, as you said, all of the disciplines come together and deal with that overarching threat that our country faces for hurricane. And once we do that, we'll be well prepared for hurricane.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. So, Drago, if like I said, 166 years. So prior to the taking date on hurricanes existed, and we see those. This hurricanes and volcanoes and earthquakes are like the prints of Earth. So when you are a geologist and you go out and you look at some of these features, you can tell, okay, that was formed by some high energy. It must have been during hurricane season. You do correlation and find out what was going on at the time. So having said that, if for over 166 years we've been getting 2 major hurricanes a year, we saw what happened in the year of Maria. We saw what happened to Antigua and these places. I have bad news for you guys. It's going to happen again. So
yes.
my thing is, my thought is because it's so much a part of our existence, you can't do hurricane preparedness only from June to November. It has to be part of the policy. And you mentioned about plants. So that is why we have a forestry division. That's why we have an agricultural division. That is why there are several ministries, because in a society, you have to have the best and your brightest making decisions on policy. If it's not a policy, then nobody's going to pay attention. And that is why the governance is there for. So for example, if you as an individual say, hey, don't cut down the tree because it's beneficial for your hydro system, somebody's going to say, well, I can cut down the tree. If there is no laws protecting that, if there is no policy that says you can't do that, and if there's no punishment, or if there's no deterrence, then anybody can cut down trees and it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, people suffer. If you say, hey, we have slopes over there, we can't put too much load on the slope, so therefore I am not approving you building another building on the slope in where was the last place? I can't remember. The last place in Dominica where they had to move that village. I cannot. Petit Savant. I can't approve you building houses in Petit Savant because you are already in an old landslide complex and you're adding load to that. So planning division has to say, I can't do it because it's not safe. At the end of the day, these things happen. I mean, in Africa, we had 5,000 people get killed not too long ago because people continue building on the slopes. And even if there were laws, nobody enforced them. So at the end of the day, Drago, you in a society understanding disaster, understanding the effect of disaster, how it can bring families and people and the country into poverty. You have to put systems and policies in place and enforce those policies for the safety of people. And if that's not done, I mean, during Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Maria and Erica, we lost, I think, 200 people in Dominica from flash flooding and landslides and so on. A lot of people died. And we, one of the things that they did not even do is to look at the long-term effects of that trauma of the hurricane on people. I mean, in Puerto Rico, there was news about several hundreds of people dying after the hurricane because of the trauma. And there are studies that show that people were traumatized, just like PTSD. What if that same thing is happening in Dominic? And I noticed last year.
I will tell you then, I know this lady from Lapland. She was 100 and like 104, something like that. But she used to go to Rosa regular, go by the Wasco, pay her bill, go down, like pay her bill, whatever. In her good health. She survived Hurricane Maria. She went into a shelter and she died 2 days after the hurricane. You know, the stress and the trauma was too much.
But even now, I noticed last year around hurricane season, September, there were lots of people who were passing out. And I asked the question, what if because of the trauma of Maria, there are people who are still affected? So every time there is word that a hurricane is coming, people might be traumatized. What sort of system, health system and counseling system we have in place so that people can learn to cope and deal with those things? I mean, like I said, it has to be all encompassing. I did not mention our health personnel or health response. They are the ones who have to work in the hospitals while their houses are being destroyed. So all these things have to do with the preparedness, understanding that even after disaster, there might be psychological and physiological effects on human beings. When they hear that storm coming, can trigger reactions that put stress on the body, and people die of heart attacks and all kind of stuff. Have we even measured that? Have we even accounted for that? Have we done anything to ensure that people feel that, you know, it's part of life? And how you prevent that is by making sure that you have a society that is so prepared, that is making hurricane preparation part of their policy and part of their life, that there is a certain level of comfort to know that, you know what, I have the best engineers in the University of the West Indies. And even that doesn't matter, but they prepare that house. It has withstood 2 or 3 hurricanes before. We know it works. I feel safe and I'm fine. And these are some of the things we have to think about.
Definitely. Well, then I've indulged you for long. We've way past 9 o'clock. So let me just ask you for closing comments. You know, for the folks that are listening, I know we're in the middle of the hurricane season, and I think most folks know what to do for the storms that might be coming next. But let's leave them with thoughts as to how they can talk to their representative, how they can talk to their family, how they themselves can think about or should be thinking about hurricane. Not necessarily that you're hoping for a hurricane to come, but to be in a position that if a major hurricane does come, one, you know how to survive, but having survived, you can see the opportunities that are being presented to you as the country climbs out of that disaster. Let's get some closing remarks from you on that.
So you know, I say the biggest cause of fear is lack of preparedness. If you're not prepared, you're going to be naturally be afraid, because that's frankly what it is. I think, like I mentioned, over 166 years ago, we've always had hurricanes. It's going to happen this year. It's going to happen next year. Preparation is not just about the June to November, but I think preparation for hurricane has to be part of the national progress, part of the national discussion. So whatever we do, I know they've talked about resilience, but you know, the first thing you build resilience is in your people. And if you build resilient people for having a good economics background, good economic situations where people can take care of themselves, pay for the insurance, do the necessary things, not cut corners because now they can afford to buy screws instead of the cheap nails. I think that helps in lessening the psychological impact, the financial impact, and the physical impact on Dominica. And I think as a society, in the general mindset of our people, we need to look at opportunities in every aspect of life, because these natural systems are going to be there whether we are wrong or not. We will be long gone, and hurricanes will still be hitting the earth. So I think we have to learn to live with them, and I think we have to make the best out of the opportunities that they present themselves.
Yeah. So Len, thank you for coming on. I believe that we touched on a lot of areas, but the general theme was to understand that hurricanes are natural phenomena. They become disasters because they disrupt our lives
Yeah,
in a disastrous way, in a
yeah,
catastrophic way. If the better prepared we are, is the less of a disaster that they
it
will
becomes.
be.
Yep.
And also there are opportunities that are presented after a hurricane.
Yeah,
If we don't take advantage of it, or if we outsource it, then all we get is the suffering,
yeah,
and we bypass and forgo the potential benefit. And so this is what this is how we have to think about it. So I want to thank you so much for this conversation. I hope we got folks thinking about it in that way. The economics of it, the education of it. Why aren't we experts in hurricane? Why do we have to depend on the US to send planes into the hurricane and bring back data and give it to us? Why isn't it the opposite, that we are supplying hurricane data to the rest of the world? All of those things. How do we think about leveraging the resources that are given to us? And if we understand that hurricanes are necessary, then we become part of that beneficial activity that happens to the planet, and we think about it more positively, we can be better prepared to take advantage of it. So thank you so much, Len. And of course, I'm sure we'll have you back. And it was a pleasure in this conversation with you.
I appreciate it. Now that I've emptied some of that information, I'm gonna find some new information to put in there.
Well, when you find out the information, come over here. We have an audience that is hungry for knowledge, and you're always welcome to come back.
All right, man. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. Thank you for
All
accepting
right.
the invitation.
Yeah,
All
no
right.
problem, man. All right.
So good night, folks. There you have it. Um, Preparing for hurricanes, a different perspective, a different scenario. Um, how can we make sure that after we suffer from a major storm, we can take advantage of the benefits that are available as we try to recover? How do we make sure that in January we prepared for hurricane? In 2023, we prepared for hurricane that's going to come in 2025. How do we build? Where do we build? How do we put systems in place? How do we shop our insurance companies so that they can then take care of their clients, and without necessarily raising rates to sky high where they cannot then afford to have insurance? How do we make our banking system robust? How do we make sure that our shelters are strong? How do we make sure that when we build a new hospital, there are provisions there for the nurses who have to come to work when there's a storm, and the doctors, because when a storm is happening, um, they have to be there, and they're worried about what's happening at home because their homes are being destroyed, but they have to be at work. All of those things that we have to think about, and think about it in its totality, not a piece there, a piece there, a piece there, or one person making a decision, or decisions being made because it is benefiting somebody who knows a powerful person. Because my brother is a policeman, and therefore, what I want, I get. Or I don't know, I'm the pastor of the church, and because it's a powerful church, I get to build a house in an area that is obviously a threat to everybody else because my water is going down, and causing the place to be waterlogged, and you get landslide. Any number of scenarios. We have to make sure that we have systems and policies in place that protect everybody as a whole. I hope you found tonight's conversation as interesting as I did, um, because we have to start to think more in an expansive way. We have to think more in a resilient way. We have to think in a truly resilient way. And so, what are we doing to the rivers when we are taking all the rocks out of the river so they can crush it to make concrete? What happens the next time you have a flood? You have no rocks to slow down the water, you have nothing going on, it just becomes a big gully and nothing to impede the velocity of the water. Why are we, how do we make folks understand that that is not acceptable? How do we make sure that on our river bank, we don't cut all the trees from the river banks, and therefore you get a lot of slippage into the river, and the river can expand, and when it's in flood state, it can go off course and cause destruction. All of those things are part of our hurricane preparedness. Some knowledge that we had that we've given away, um, we need to start to think, and we need to start to question and make sure that the solution that they're given to us makes sense. The decisions that we see taken around us doesn't make us more susceptible in that period of time from June to November that we call the hurricane season or the rainy season and so on. All right. So I hope you learned something tonight. And if you did, you know, send me a text, send me a comment. Let me know how we did. And what I want to do is to wish you um, a happy rest of the week. Those of you in the US this weekend, come in next week. It's 4th of July weekend, so have fun, be safe. Next, on the 15th, there is that expo in New Jersey, in the Diaspora Art and Craft Expo, hosted by Miss Maslin Edwards. So check it out. It was really fun. If you go there, you're going to get everything Dominican: food, clothes, treats, painting, books, personal care products, jewelry, um, everything you can think of, services that are provided by Dominicans. So plan to go there if you're in the area. It's in New Jersey, it's in Irvington, New Jersey 767 Irvington. And so Maslin is going to be my guest next week. On this weekend interview, we're going to talk about the exposition that's coming up. All right, folks, I'm going to say good night. Thank you to my guest, Mr. Len Matthew, and I'll see you again next week. Good night.